So Nancy worked for USGS for most of your career, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And she's an aquatic plant ecologist and affiliate professor at George Mason University. She retired, what, about a year ago, I think, from, right, or more, was it?
More. I've been retired since 2017.
The same year as me? I thought you stayed on. Okay, sorry. So yeah, a long time, more than I thought. But you're still working for them. I guess that's why it's confusing. You're still kind of doing work. And she worked out in Reston. And let's see, she's on the National Capital Region PRISM, another PRISM partnership for regional invasive species management. And she assists the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources, the complementary workforce. I'm not actually sure what that is. And I threw in the line about when you're not working, you're sailing on the Chesapeake Bay, because that's what you do. And if Ian Fingston gets on or is on or whatever, I just want to give him a little shout out that he's also an aquatic plant ecologist with USGS out of Gainesville, Florida. And both Nancy and Ian and another person were heavily important and involved in the aquatic plant chapter in Plant Invaders, the Plant Invaders of Mid-Atlantic Natural Areas that Judy and I worked on. And if it wasn't for the three of them checking and everything that was written, every time I rewrote something, I sent it to them and they checked it and made sure everything was accurate. So if anything's wrong, it's their fault.
Thanks, Jill.
Anyway, I'll stop yakking. And tonight, Nancy's going to talk about her investigations into this new species of Trapa that I guess they're calling two-horned Trapa. I kind of like that. It's more easy to say, but it's Trapa bispinosa var variety iinumai. And it's not the water chestnut from Europe. It's a new species that Nancy was observant enough to notice back in like 2014. And so she's been beating the drum for years. I've been trying to help her get the word out, and I'll go ahead and let her take it from here. So welcome and thank you, Nancy.
I'm going to talk about Trapa bispinosa, and it is also called two-horned Trapa. I think Jill coined the phrase, or two-horned water chestnut. It's a new species of water chestnut spreading rapidly in Virginia and Maryland. My co-author is Ian Fingston. I'm in Reston, retired from the Reston USGS, and he's actually out of Gainesville, Florida. So as the story goes, in 2014, for the first time in decades, water chestnut, the genus Trapa, was found in the tidal Potomac River in Potomac Bay in Virginia. It was reported by John Odenkirk, who's with the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources. And at first, we identified it as Trapa natans, which had been in the Potomac historically. But we soon recognized it was something different and distinct from Trapa natans. Why is Trapa a noteworthy kind of plant? Well, in 1923, a 2 acres colony of the non-native Trapa natans was found in the tributary of the Potomac, and it grew to 90 acres in 3 years. By 1940, the colony had grown to 9,000 acres, and it had spread from Washington, D.C. all the way down to Quantico, 70 kilometers. Dense beds of water chestnut were reported to shade out the native bay grasses that provide food and habitat for fish and waterfowl. This photo on the right is a photo from a science newsletter in 1941, where the Department of Ag was trying to figure out, what to do with this plant and whether they could compost it or feed it to cows or whatever. So the government was definitely involved because it was right here in the Potomac River near Washington, D.C. But as I said, it was reported to be shading out the submersed aquatic vegetation, the native bay grasses, and that was a problem. Water chestnut impedes navigation and recreation on the water, and it affects the aesthetics of water bodies. If you look at these seeds, these are empty hulls of seeds, but they're still rock hard, and they have these spines. And it was reported that they would, if you stepped on them, they would pierce your feet, and it's absolutely true. And they wash up on the shoreline of beaches and made it difficult for people to just use the beaches back in those days. The floating rosettes of the water chestnut can be so thick on the surface, like a blanket, that obstructs light and reduces the amount of oxygen that can exchange from the air into the water column. On a positive note, though, this amount of biomass can take up nutrients in the water column and reduce nutrient concentrations in the water. And as a result, if you harvest the plants, which is what they did back in the day, to remove it, if you harvest the plants, you're also removing those nutrients from the water body. Other characteristics of the genus Trapa, it's an annual. It has roots and floating leaves on the surface. It's found in freshwater lakes, ponds, and embayments of large rivers and estuaries. And it grows in water up to 10 feet deep. The genus Trapa is native to Europe, South Africa, and Asia. And until 2014, there was only one species of water chestnut known in the United States. The Trapa natans was intentionally planted back in the 1870s in Massachusetts, and in the 1880s in New York. It was planted as an ornamental plant. It's edible and it has medicinal qualities. Since then, it's spread throughout the Northeast US, and as I said, was eradicated from the Potomac decades ago by the Army Corps of Engineers. Oh, also, I want to mention it's not the water chestnut found in a can at the grocery store. That is the genus Eleocharis. This is the range of Trapa natans in the US, and it's all the way up into Canada and down as far as Virginia is its southern range. We have some colonies of it in the freshwater portions of the upper Chesapeake Bay that Maryland DNR is still battling and pulling up annually. But this red oval, it represents the distribution of water chestnut, up until the 1950s. And all of this was eradicated before the 60s. So when we found the water chestnut in Potomac Bay, it was, of course, misidentified. We thought it was Trapa natans. And this is what Trapa natans looks like, to refresh your, if you've ever seen it. It has leaves that are green on the underside. It has white flowers, the four-spined fruits. The fruits or seeds, once they're have this prominent crown on the surface, as opposed to this two-horned water chestnut, which the underside of the leaf is reddish. The flowers are pink. The sepals are red. The seeds are two-horned. And here's a comparison of Trapa natans on the left and Trapa bispinosa on the right. And you see again the white flower of Trapa natans and the pink flower on the right of Trapa bispinosa. Here it shows the green on the underside of the leaf rosettes for Trapa natans, and Trapa bispinosa is clearly red on the underside. There's some variation in this, but it's a good diagnostic feature if you see the red underside of the leaf. And again, on the right, you see the Trapa bispinosa. Clearly, it only has 2 spines on the fruit, which became very obvious that we had something different. So once we knew we had something different, the best way to figure out what species you have, of course, is to do a DNA study. So we did that. We partnered with taxonomists from around the world that were specialists in Trapa, and they sent to the U.S. Geological Survey specimens of Trapa from their areas of expertise in their regions that they lived. And we analyzed the morphology of the fruits, and we did DNA on 22 different populations of water chestnut from around the world. And the results indicated that what we had here in the United States, this newly introduced species, was very similar to the species that was found in Taiwan. And in Taiwan, they call it Trapa bispinosa Roxbury variety iinumai nakano. So we took that name and we've called it that ever since. That species is native to Taiwan, China, Korea, and Japan. So we can't say that it came directly from Taiwan. It could have come from Taiwan, China, Korea, or Japan. In 2024, my colleagues in China we did another DNA study, and we compared the Trapa natans from the U.S. and the Trapa bispinosa in the U.S. with many populations and different species from China. And again, we showed that the Trapa natans and Trapa bispinosa in the U.S. are different from one another. So back in 2014, we managed the colony that we found in Potomac Bay. The Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources has a lot of volunteers, and they organized an event with lots of people, a couple dozen people, and boats and equipment. And the volunteers hand pulled the water chestnut and placed it in bushel baskets. And we had a bucket brigade, like kind of a situation where we handed the baskets off to in a line of people. We dumped it into this front end loader, and the front end loader took it up to the upland and dumped it in a big pile. And it was a third of an acre, and it only took us half a day. It was a nice sandy bottom. It was low tide in the Potomac, and everything worked great. A lot of coordination and a lot of volunteers to accomplish that. And the Department of Wildlife Resources continued to do that every year until it was eradicated from that site. So the chart at the top is the pounds of water chestnut that were harvested each year, and the amount diminished over time. And you might see that in 2014, we harvested about 5,000 pounds wet weight. And, but we didn't have the event until September. So the plants were laden with fruits, and all those many fruits had already reseeded the site. So in 2015, we actually had more water chestnut to harvest than the year before. But in 2015, we got there in early July or so, and maybe late June, and we harvested it all. Then they came back and did a little mop up afterwards just to make sure every plant was gone. So by 2016, there was just a handful of plants, and that continued in 2017 and until it was gone. So Invasive Trapa populations in the US, whether it's natans or bispinosa, are managed with mechanical harvesting equipment, hand pulling, or with herbicides. There's a big difference in cost. The hand pulling costs about $22,000 for an acre to an acre and a half, while the herbicide treatments for the same area is about $2,000 to $5,000 to manage it. But regardless of the management method, the ideal time for control of this plant is before the seeds set. And that reduces the chance of recolonization. And for this species, Trapa bispinosa, it sprouts in late April, and it grows until December, when it dies after a hard frost. So if management is initiated by early June, and then mop up harvesting is done a month later and a month after that, that's the best management strategy. So there are several dispersal mechanisms for these seeds and the plant. The seeds have these barbed spines that are like Velcro, and they hitchhike on the plumage of Canada geese in particular, we've witnessed, and other types of waterfowl, other animals, the fur of any kind of animal, or a person can walk through a plant bed of water chestnut when it's and the seeds will attach to your clothing. So in addition, the seeds will float downstream while they're still attached to a rosette. Plants can also get wrapped around a boat propeller, and they can get transported to a new water body by boat owners moving from water body to water body and inadvertently doing that. Humans also have intentionally traded this water chestnut, and then sometimes that will cause the seeds to be transported very long distances, and that's how Trapa natans got to the United States in the first place. This is a distribution map of Trapa in 2022, and it is reported in Virginia and Maryland, but no other locations in the United States. In 1995, it was reported in Westmoreland and Stafford County in the Potomac River watershed. So we know that it started long ago. By 2022, it's established in Fairfax County, Prince William, Loudoun, Fauquier in Virginia, and PG County in Maryland, all in the Potomac watershed. And it's recently been found in 2022 in Charlotte County, way down in south of Richmond and south of Farmville, Virginia, and that is the Roanoke watershed. So all of these dots represent sites that we have verified that it is Trapa bispinosa by the observer sending photos to us, or I go and visit the site myself. And in most cases, I've visited the site myself. And all of this information is available on the USGS Non-Indigenous Aquatic Species website. So in addition to showing the distribution, we have a blow up inset on the left so you can see a little bit better some of the high density populations, and the different colors represent what we know to be the year of colonization of each site, based on interviews that we've done with pond owners and or looking at Google Map and historical photographs of each of the sites. So the number of colonies has doubled year after year. For example, it was verified in 18, and 33 water bodies in 2016, 2017, and 2018. And now, as I said, we have about 100 water bodies. and that includes a large impoundment in Maryland. The sites in Maryland were located at Greenbelt Lake and on Beaver Dam Creek. Beaver Dam Creek is within the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. And when it was discovered, Maryland DNR got involved, and Maryland DNR collaborated with many other organizations, including the USGS and PRISM, Audubon Society. They have a lot of volunteers fairly readily available. And so for several days, they organized hand pulling events at this large colony in Beaver Dam Creek. However, even though we had several and we were having them in June, after several days of harvesting, we had barely made a dent in the vast bed of Trapa bispinosa. And there was just no more time that the Maryland DNR could set aside to organize any more events, and no more events were set up. So we made, it was a kind of a educational experience, because there were a lot of people there, and a lot of people learned about it, but we did not make a dent in that population. So over the winter, the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center installed a pipe in the beaver dam, hoping to prevent the water from impounding there and to cause a drawdown. And the hope is that that will affect the population, dry out a lot of the area, and we'll know more about the results of that this summer. We wanted to do a risk assessment study to see how many water bodies are at risk from this seed dispersal by waterfowl. So we delineated a dispersal area, which was about 15 kilometers of buffer zone and 30 kilometers around what we called the epicenter of water chestnut. And we overlaid all the sites that we knew with water chestnut with the National Hydrography Data Set. The hydrography data set is a network of all the U.S. features such as rivers, streams, canals, lakes, and ponds. So this figure shows the hydrography overlain with each of the Trapa sites. The symbols indicate the initial year of Trapa bispinosa colonization at that site. And on the left, it's the northern population in Virginia and Maryland, that map. And on the right side, the map is the southern range in Virginia. So as I said, it was in 7 counties, and we don't include the Westmoreland and Stafford County populations, because we didn't get those exact locations. What we had was records from a herbarium at Virginia Tech, and clearly the specimen had 2 spines, and it was Trapa bispinosa, and except we don't know exactly where the site was. The extension agent that collected the specimen and collected it both in Westmoreland and Stafford told the pond owners to remove the plant because it was a non-native. And she thought it had identified it as Trapa natans, and we assume that those pond owners that did remove the plant. So this is a map that Ian created. It shows all the boat launch areas. Those are the pink symbols. The gold symbols, the triangles, are the Trapa sites. And you can see in blue all the different water bodies that are at risk of colonization. The orange circle is the 15-kilometer buffer zone, and the gold-colored circle is the 30-kilometer buffer zone around the star in the center, which is what we're calling the epicenter. And that star represents Twin Lakes Golf Course, which has been a colony since at least the year 2000. So Ian used GIS techniques and counted all the water bodies in the 15 and 30 kilometer buffer zones in this area in Virginia and the one population in Maryland. He did the same thing for the southern extent. The star represents three ponds in Cullen, Virginia. So that's the epicenter for the southern population. And again, we show where the boat launches are in pink, and he counted all the blue designated water bodies in the 15 and the 30 kilometer buffer. What we found was that there were 3,700 water bodies within the 30 kilometer buffer area and 1,000 within the 15 kilometer buffer area of Clifton, Virginia. There are 23 boat launches that are within the 30 kilometer and two within the 15 kilometer buffer area. And these represent risky locations if you have a boat launch, because if that site gets colonized, the plants are susceptible to being tangled in boat propellers, and humans can transport the plants outside the watershed. So that could be a big leap in the distance from the epicenter if such a thing would happen. So in Southern Virginia, there's still 3,000 water bodies within the 30 kilometer and 600 within the 15 kilometer buffer area of the epicenter in Cullen, Virginia. There are only 6 public boat launches down in that area within 30 kilometers of that epicenter. So we have determined the oldest and most centrally located of all the current populations was at Fairfax County Park Authority's Twin Lakes Golf Course. This is a site with 9 ponds, and they had made some attempts to harvest or to manage it, but it was all dependent on funding at that particular site for each year, and they just never really got it done. And so that population was there from 2000 for decades. So the most introductions are within the 30 kilometer buffer area, with the exception of the site at Charlotte County. That was 218 kilometers from the epicenter, and the Greenbelt site in Maryland, that one's 49 kilometers from the epicenter. So we're starting to get a little further away, but the majority of these colonies are within 30 kilometers of the epicenter. The Maryland sites are 33 kilometers away, and we assume that it was dispersed by waterfowl between the epicenter in Clifton and Maryland. The Charlotte County populations represent a leap, and now that's 200 kilometers distant from the original epicenter. Good news, in 2023, several aquatic plant control programs were funded in Virginia. These are strike teams. This is a good thing in Virginia. In 2023, state agencies obtained funds for managing Trapa at no cost to the property owner. Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District announced the program to manage sites only in Fairfax County, only at public property such as parks, HOA, and church ponds or lakes. And they were able to obtain at least $100,000 their first year, and they're continuing again next year or this year. Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services announced their program also, and they will be able to manage water chestnut at private and public properties in Virginia. And they got something around $100,000. They started going to the sites last fall, and then this year they're actually starting to manage sites. We don't know the exact number of water bodies they'll be able to manage, but it's going to be a good start, and what looks to be at least a 2 to 5 year effort to hopefully slow the spread of water chestnut. And also, the third organization is the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources. They continue to manage large lakes in their jurisdiction, like Lake Brittle and Burke Lake. So as a result, there's about 60% of the sites are now managed. And some of them were being managed by the property owners themselves. Some were not. We are having a lot of difficulty. We know where the sites are, but we don't always know who the owner of the pond is. So if we're working now really hard to figure out who to send these permission forms to. So on the right is a permission form that if you have a pond with water chestnut, you can fill out this form and get on the list for treatment by Virginia Department of Ag and Consumer Services. But we really need more volunteers out looking and monitoring for Trapa bispinosa. If you find it, we would hope you would take photographs of the seeds, the flower, the top, and the underside of the plant so that we can verify the species. And we are hoping for people to report the colonies online to the USGS non-Indigenous aquatic species database so that we can keep track of where all these colonies are. And when funding does come around, we can work with the states, hopefully Maryland in the future, but certainly Virginia now, and tell them, here's all the sites, these, and we often know the contact information. Sometimes we don't, but we can, it gives us a big head start if we have a huge database with all the sites. So if you're out monitoring, you need to look for different things at different times of the year. In the winter, the hulls of the seeds will be washed up on the shoreline, and you can see them, and that's a good indication that the previous year there was a colony of water chestnut there. And in April, they're sprouting, and in June until December, they're at the surface, and then you can see the rosette. We have a lot of outreach material that's being produced by Fairfax County and PRISM, and those outreach materials are available to anybody that needs them, that would help instigate more monitoring. As I said, in the winter, you would look for the seeds, and right now they're just starting. Those are last year's seeds that'll be on the shoreline. But if you have a rake and you dig around right now into a pond, you will pull up these tiny little sprouts. So they're just starting to sprout. And this is an example of April of last year. Here's the seed at the bottom, and here's the stem, and the rosette is just getting started. So they're trying to reach to the surface where they'll start branching out. And between May and December, the rosette diameter is a maximum of 14 inches in diameter. The flowers start in June, and fruits start in July, and the fruits are at a maximum in September. So early detection really helps reduce removal costs and ecological impacts. If you know where it is and you see it early, it's really simple to pull it up. If it goes undetected and the colony gets huge, it's very difficult to control it, and much larger ecological impacts. So many efforts are underway to survey and manage these populations, but the dispersal downstream and by waterfowl may be outpacing our efforts. We ask for more volunteers to report the sightings, and if you scan this, it will take you to the USGS site for reporting, and we will keep track of all the populations. To get involved in the VDAX program in Virginia, all you have to do is fill out one of these forms. The forms are available by contacting David Giannino, or contacting me, or if you report it, I will send you, if somebody reports it on their property, I will, and I have their email address, I would right away send them this permission form if they're in Virginia. So finally, I'd like to acknowledge all the people that have private property landowners, volunteers, scientists who have continually raised awareness about Trapa and helped with our research, including John Odenkirk, Sarah Tangren, Kevin Heffernan, Eric Caldwell, Mike Naylor, Mark Lewandowski, David Giannino, Lindy Dodd. And I'd also like to thank many, many managers that are in federal, city, county, private, and public places. And they're all collaborating with us and sharing their time and providing information and assistance that help us get this information from all these multiple jurisdictions. We have lots of references to support this presentation, and references that I didn't really talk about much, but there are lots of now specific references about Trapa bispinosa, and we have lots of web pages. The National Capital Region PRISM has a nice alert out. It's 2 pages showing you how to identify water chestnut. And I think I mentioned the Kevin Heffernan had written an early detection rapid response plan, and that's available online as well. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them either right now, or you can email my USGS email.
Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Okay, if anyone has a question, just raise your hand. It's almost May 1st, so I have a question. So what are you going to be doing during May? And then and then into June to try to encourage people to get out there and pull and whatever before the fruits form? I mean,
well, I think because Ian and I have this database and have case history on every single point, it kind of falls on me to help the Virginia Department of Ag and Consumer Services to identify the contacts for some of these sites that they just can't figure out who to contact. They spent a lot of time looking at the tax records and getting addresses for every pond that we know about, but sometimes that doesn't lead you to anybody that's going to respond. It may be the wrong address, it's an old address, something, So I would like to, they gave me a list of ponds that they got no response when they sent out these permission forms. So that's probably one of my highest priorities. PRISM is doing a lot of work with outreach and that kind of thing. So And I would like to help anybody in Maryland that wants
yeah.
to try to figure out what they're going to do now.
Yeah, if could you send us just specifically maybe the slide with the Maryland sites and the name of the sites, and maybe we could post something on the website. Maybe we'll send an email out to the membership, but that's a pretty rare thing. But at least we could post it to the website and explain the time frame, and if people are interested in helping. I don't think I can lead an effort right now. It's a really tight month into June, actually. But it might help us at least know what we should be doing and what those populations are like right now in Maryland at Bark and at Greenbelt Lake, right? And there was a third place. There were 3 sites.
There's the main part of Beaver Dam Creek below the dam, and then further down. So there's 2 in Beaver Dam Creek. And those are kind of hard to get to unless you're walking. You can't like drive right up to them. And it's, federal property. So there's fences and gates and things like that.
Well, some of us have access due to Rod Simmons having a permit. Did you go on one of those hikes up there?
I didn't. I missed it.
Okay. Because if it's north of Powder Mill Road,
I can.
That's why I think if you send us the information, I could check with Rod. At least we would know about it, and we can let some of the people that come on those trips that are really interested in what's going on back there. We might get a few people, saying they want to go look for the water chestnut and, maybe cut the flowers, pull it up, whatever they need to do. I mean, I don't know how hard that's going to be out there in a pond,
Yeah. So more to the point would be to when Maryland DNR sets up this year's harvest or whatever, if they do, would be to advertise that with Maryland Native Plant Society. And then for monitoring, you can monitor on your own when you go to the store. If there's a stormwater pond, look in it. Look in the pond, if you're bird watching, wherever you are, especially if you're within, 30 or 15 kilometers of the Beaver Dam Creek. But unfortunately, we've recently, we peruse iNaturalist reports. And whenever there's a report of Trapa natans, we want to check it out. And there was a report and a photograph in Harford County recently in iNaturalist, and we are so it may have already spread from PG into Harford County, and we're so extend your monitoring from PG County into Harford County, because it may have already gotten there.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that. Lauren, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, a couple things. First of all, I was talking with Nancy earlier when we were testing out her audio, and I told her my comment will be, hey, at least we don't have alligators. Because, it's not that bad. Like, you can go out there and scoop the stuff out, and it actually is, you can eradicate it. Like, that's kind of encouraging, right? So you don't actually have to worry about getting, snatched by an alligator.
That's right.
The other thing, I think, I'm not exactly sure what the path is for us, the Maryland Native Plant Society, to be notified about volunteer events, but it does seem very doable if we can get the right information to get that onto our, we have this website that can set up for hosting events or share about events or things like that. So it seems like that would be a really good thing for us to do, particularly for these sites in Maryland, obviously. And I don't know if you have a similar partner in Virginia.
Well, and I'll add a quick note. I did go on a polling event with Nancy, and so did Martha Weiss. We went out a few times to a big golf course.
Twin Lakes Golf Course.
Thank you, Twin Lakes. Yeah. And it's not super simple to pull. There are like a dozen people, and you get in, you have to have something to put the stuff on. You have to wear pretty good gloves because it does jab you, the fruits will, if they're at fruiting stage. But even if they're not, they're last year fruits. That's the other thing. They're last year fruits that you got to deal with. But you have to put it in something. So what is the latest method that you prefer for like something where you can walk into the pond? And do you use, like, remember we were trying things like laundry baskets and
Yeah.
whatever we could come up with?
Well, when the Maryland DNR will provide you the cement mixing, the black trays. They had, dozens of those. You just tie them to a canoe or a kayak. And the easiest thing is to pull from a boat. And, some people were actually walking around doing it, but that site is really soft bottom. So you almost have to be in a boat at Beaver Dam. Maryland DNR got a dozen canoes donated that day with the trailer and everything. And that, they did a lot to organize that event. We just didn't have 600 hours of volunteer hours. We had, a fraction of that.
Yeah.
So it is a big ordeal to do it, and they did it right. It just, there just wasn't enough time. I mean, they're not funded to do this kind of thing, and they could only devote so many days, to doing it.
Right. Well, and then there was the material. There were like, it was a pretty good sized pond, and it had quite a lot of Trapa. And there were some of us on one end, and then was it a Boy Scout group or just, I forget, the guys that were at the other end? And everybody was pulling stuff out and dumping it. And we ended up with a lot of material on the grass. And then we had support of the staff of the golf course who brought a big backhoe thing with a shovel and loaded it up and took it around to the dump site. And, so I think probably what I would say is we shouldn't do anything without organizing it, probably with you, to say, what should we do for this particular site? It is really a site by site thing.
Yeah.
It seems like, because we could even make it worse if we do something wrong. I mean,
yeah. Well, you could waste your time, but
time, yeah.
that it will. I guarantee, the best way to do it is to really know you've got enough volunteers. It's much simpler now to use the Maryland DNR method, which is you take 4 poles and you wrap construction fence around them, and you just compost in the water. So that way the plants are stacked on top of each other and they decompose and die. You've pulled them up by the roots. You're just piling them in a compost pile in the water. So it takes time to build the structure, but it's less back breaking because
that sounds really smart. That's a good idea.
Yeah. And that's the way Maryland DNR has been doing it in where they've been harvesting Trapa natans in the upper Chesapeake Bay, and they've learned a lot. They actually learned that from historical reports of
cool. Isn't that nice?
Yeah. And they passed it on to us. So the other thing is collaboration. And learning from each other. And one message for outreach is we all need to be on the same page. Maryland, Virginia, wherever, is it takes 3 to 5 years. You have to be vigilant. You can't just say, you're the best thing to do is to have a plan for each site and have a site adopted, and to do it before the fruits fall.
And so what's that timeline? that you're telling people? When is it too late?
You want to
The
do
date.
a big harvest before the 4th of July.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good way to remember it. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, people out there, do you have some questions? You ready to go pull some Trapa? Hey, wait, where is everybody?
Sure.
Doesn't it sound like fun? You get poked with these really nasty fruits.
I think the marketing really needs to shift towards boating. It's boating with a little plant pulling on.
Yes.
Yeah.
You gotta, yeah, make it a little more fun. Are there
And
donuts involved, right?
Oh yes, right. And the fruits make really nice necklaces. You're not wearing your necklace, are you?
No, I shouldn't.
Martha Weiss is so talented. She took a bunch of the fruits and did she knock the points a little, or maybe not? I think she left them on. So, it hurts.
Well, she actually purchased those, their
That's
Trapa.
right.
There were different species.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. Okay. But
They weren't sharp.
Right. Okay. I have one of the real ones, and I was thinking I wouldn't want to wear that on my.
No, you don't want to wear that. No.
But anyway, they are kind of cool looking.
Yeah, they're weird.
Kind of bat-like or something.
Yeah.
Or ray-like.
But
Well,
it's not too early for Maryland to start organizing and, learning. PRISM is there. National Capital Region PRISM is there with lots of experience. The Washington Metropolitan Council of Government is kind of an umbrella for that. And it takes, organizations like Maryland Native Plant Society somebody has to lead the charge for Maryland. But, ultimately, there needs to be somebody paid to organize and get funding, because
well, I think in our case, it's probably not going to happen, to be very frank, unless we have an outside source like from DC Prism,
Yeah.
our contact, whose name is right on my head, or DNR, Maryland DNR. If they know that we may have some interest in some volunteers helping out, and they can get that information to us so that we can advertise it, that is one way that we could do it. And then our DC Prism person is paid. I don't know what's happening with that right now. Maybe it's kind of an off time between being paid, but we need other people to organize that and have everything kind of lined up and let us know the days, the times, and etc. And then we can post it. It'd be like a field trip. We would list it as a field trip kind of a
there
thing.
you go.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So maybe keep that in mind, and if you can help us when you're talking to the DNR people, let them know that we would like to be notified.
Great.
Okay, Lauren. Excuse me, Lauren.
Yeah. I have I don't know if this is a good question to ask, but I'm going to ask it. So Nancy,
Yes.
how hopeful are you that this species will get eradicated versus going wild,
Yeah. I'm very hopeful. I mean, for Virginia, I think that every single pond could be adopted. And I think there's more money coming down the line for strike teams. And when you have a strike team, you just have to give them the site. This is the site. You have to have permission, and it's done. It's unfortunately, I wish it could be more natural, but what they're doing is herbicides, we're trying to keep data on what herbicide, what everything about it, so that we can evaluate the effectiveness of the particular herbicides and that kind of thing. So I think there's a really good chance that it can be eradicated.
Okay.
It's just not, it's spreading pretty fast, but 100 sites that we know of, that's doable if you have a strike team.
Yeah.
Really quick, Ian just made a note that disappeared. He said we need 100 more. It's gone. 100 more Nancy's, one for each pond.
That's hilarious. What we need is remote sensing. We really need a program that you know, uses remote sensing to help us. And then we would have people on the ground check ground truthing, you know, the sites that are brought to our attention by remote sensing. Because, you know, if there's money to manage it, all you have to do is tell them where, give them permission. I mean, I really do think it's possible.
Mhm.
Okay, Rod Walker, thank you for being patient.
Yeah, no, I've two comments or questions. One is, you know, we do have a project going with UVA on remote sensing using drones. It's about to wrap up. It's focused on terrestrial plants. But if somebody had some money to throw at it, we could potentially get the next round of that project, yeah, to focus on trying to go after this plant because it's should be visible from the air. That would be interesting.
It's definitely visible from the air. It's a matter of time. I mean, if you had imagery to review, there's something called NAIP imagery that's done for agricultural purposes. You know, you just need a person that can review it, or a machine or something. That would be one way. It's 1 meter resolution. Doing the drone flying, I really don't know. I think it's a very interesting idea. You know, any kind of remote sensing would be helpful.
Sure. My other question is potentially a very stupid question. But if somebody developed a machine that went along the surface of the water, sucked in the plants, and totally shredded them, and spit the shreds out behind it, would that kill the plant or prevent it from propagating?
It does not. Yes, because it doesn't. It doesn't come back from a fragment. If you just pull it up, you've done your job. So it doesn't come back from a fragment.
And then so basically skimming and destroying all the leaf on the surface would do the job.
No, you have to pull it up by the root. When we do it, we manually, it's like spaghetti. I mean, you're reaching down to the bottom and you're pulling up the root. You can't leave a piece of root. You have to.
And it is an annual, right?
Yeah.
But it can still regrow, and that's
it can still regrow if the root is there. So mechanical harvesters maintain it. They can, you know, take the top off, but then you have to just keep mowing it over and over to prevent it from getting to the point it can make fruits.
Yeah, because it's not like stilt grass where if you cut it to the ground just before it seeds, it's too late for it to grow back up and seed again. So you can get stilt grass mechanically, you know, if you do it at the right time and the right way. But I guess that doesn't work with this stuff.
Well, we tried it at Twin Lakes Golf Course. If you go in July and you just clip the top off, it's going to grow so fast that in 2 weeks it's back to the surface and ready to make fruit.
Yeah.
Is there a time, Nancy, is there a time that you could not have to worry about the roots and just harvest, you know, like August, September, you know, when it's not going to grow back? Is there like target it later?
Yeah, maybe.
For the shredding?
You know, you could, but it's so dense by that time, you know.
Right.
But hasn't it already made the seed by then?
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's as soon as it starts to make those fruits, they're kind of dropping all, you know, every day a couple of them drop from an individual rosette.
But they would be shredded. I guess that was the thought. If the machine was just a monster shredder, type of thing, whatever fruits are there that hadn't been taken away, it would like a blender.
Yeah. You'd be blending a Brazil nut. I mean, they're that hard.
They are really hard. Oh well, maybe it could shred everything and then scoop up all the fruits.
Well, I have seen some interesting machines, very expensive, but that twist around and remove water hyacinth from canals. But it's much easier because you can, it's either on a barge or it's on the edge of the water. It depends on the site. I mean, some sites are well manicured lawns, and you could maybe and open and that kind of thing. Maybe it's possible to. There's equipment, and I've looked into it. It's just expensive, but now that there's some funding, maybe it would be possible. That what usually happens is the state will choose the cheaper way, which is the herbicides.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what's the byproduct in the herbicide? Like, what other species get wiped out?
Well, there's a lot of herbicides, and as I interview pond owners, I ask what management technique they have used in the past and whether it worked. And so I have a list of a lot of them. There's a little bit of research done by the Corps of Engineers, Lindy Dodd, where she's taken 4 or 5 different products that are available and looked at the effectiveness on water chestnut and the effectiveness on the non-target natives. And some of them are more specific than others, So the ones that don't harm the non-target species are newer, and so they're more expensive. So that's a drawback for whether there's enough money to use those. So what we did with Fairfax County is we said, you have to use those. We only know about that one product. And Fairfax County said, okay, we'll tell the contractor that. But, and that was wonderful that we were able to have input to who was, what they did and what product they used. We don't have a lot of information, but we did the best we could to advise them. And they came to the scientists asking, what do you know? And what do you think we should do? So instead of just taking the advice of the chemical company, that's 2 different things.
Yeah.
There's 2 different ways to go about it. Yeah.
Right.
So any good plan should involve some good research on products that don't harm non-target species.
So it sounds like if someone sees something, put it on iNat, and it'll probably get looked at.
It will. It'll take longer. If you just email me, that'd be pretty quick.
Okay. Do both.
What about EdMaps? Is it working on
EdMap is the same. If it, Ian will get around quarterly to looking at EdMaps and iNaturalist. There's no automated way of doing it right now. So since I consider USGS the master file,
yes,
and it's easier for me if you just go directly to Ian and I or the USGS web.
Hey, in our last few minutes, Ian, if you're still on, would you please introduce yourself and just give a 1-minute, 2-minute blurb about the national NAS, National Aquatic Species Database, right? NAS.
Yeah. Hi. Good evening, everyone.
Hey, hi, Ian.
Hear me? Hi. And thank you all, and thank you, Nancy. Yeah. So I started as the aquatic botanist for the USGS Non-Indigenous Aquatic Species Database in 2015. Came across some of Nancy's work around then, or maybe 2016, and yeah, the sort of purview of the group is looking at anything that's in the waters, mostly freshwater. There are some marine species we look at, and estuarine species, but the mostly freshwater non-native species throughout the U.S. and its territory islands as well. So it's a lot of the animals, the vertebrate animals, the amphibians, the reptiles, the fishes, some mammals like nutria, which you've probably seen in Maryland, or hopefully you're not seeing them anymore because they've been working really hard to get rid of nutria up there. And then my side's a lot of the plants, but then there's also the mollusks and the mussels, the snails, and the crayfish, and all the other fun invertebrates as well, the bryozoans, things like that. So I focus on the aquatic plants and trying to give people that information, where it's found, some background, you know, what source we use to find it, and then I go through some other databases like Nancy said, and I'll help ID. So try to verify myself what iNaturalist records there are, so we're not just using whatever's out there, but actually seeing, okay, yeah, this is what they say it is, or it's not, and then we'll put it on the NES database.
Can you pop it up on your computer and share your screen? Because I don't know if a lot of people even know what it is. It's been around for decades, right? Like 40 years or longer. I don't know, a long time.
It wasn't this fancy. It was more of just an internal database, and we just made sort of these custom static maps. But now it's a full-fledged public database that anybody can see. So this is the front page. It's still stuck in the 90s a little bit, but it's you can look at we're including some other aspects as well, but you can go specifically to say plants, and the whole list. There's about 6 pages of different plant species that we're looking at, and each of them has so here I'm going to show you one in particular here for water chestnut. You can see here's the 2 different water chestnuts here, and on this map, and if I want to specify it from clusters or individual species locations, here the different color-coded diamonds show where two-spine water chestnut's located versus the 4-spine water chestnut, and some historic locations as well here in the Potomac. And say if I wanted to get some more information, there's a species profile with some photos to help identification, and also a few things about some identification tips and lookalikes. So like here's Ludwigia setioides. Sometimes this works, sometimes these links don't work. But yeah, so this is a lookalike here, not Trapa. If there's a native range or not, where that's at. And we'll look at native transplants as well. So if there's something that's maybe native to Florida and not native to the Northeast United States or out west, we'll look at that as well. A little bit about the ecology, the means of introduction, impacts as well. We have a whole table about impacts. So if I show you here, there's more impacts are documented for the older Trapa. So if this is Trapa natans here, and you can see it's got a bit more of a spread, as Nancy showed, in the Northeast, and more history here, first observed in their respective states and where the last record was reported. And then you can see these list of ecological, economic, and human health impacts. And if you clicked on one of these icons, it'll give you those specific either anecdotal or observational or experimental studies that were providing this information, this evidence of the impact here. And so you click on the impact ID, and it'll say it's used as a medicine, and here's the reference. So you click on that, and here's the reference that's provided. So it's a lot of background info, as well as some interesting functional little products. So I've showed you the map, the species profile. There's also an animated map. This has been around for a while too. And so this will show you here little dots, and I don't know why it's so zoomed out. I'm going to zoom in real quick, showing the locations through time and its spread rate.
Yeah, that's neat. That's really cool.
Yeah, so it's just all things that we try to do with the database and make them interesting and useful for the public. And you can see here most current 2023 and spread. So anyway, that's pretty much it. And if you have any questions, or you want to find out more about it, a specimen, like here's a whole bunch from Maryland that were submitted, and I think these were all for my naturalist. Yeah, so this is the specimen page, and gives information about the day and year it was collected and the location if it's provided. And then I try to link it to the iNaturalist source as well. So you can click on the link and it'll say, okay, here it is. And you can look at the picture yourself and see, okay, yeah, so it's got the pink flowers, it's got the underside reddish leaves, and the petioles are dark and everything. So that to me seems like a good enough ID. So I'd go with that. Yeah. Yep. And so this is one that was, yeah, so here's iNaturalist is keeping up pretty well with it too. So that's been helpful. People, I really commend the utility of iNaturalist. It's such a useful tool for the public. We can't get the same response from a government. We can't even get the resources to make an app like that. So, we're doing the best we can. But yeah, if you ever want to do a sighting report, we have our sighting report page here. That's fairly intuitive, but you would select, which organism type, plant, and you don't. I mean, if you know the common name, some of these things are not required, but just as much as you can put in there when you observed it, where it was. If you can put the coordinates on the map, even better. Sometimes the photos will have that information. You can give a description about the location, and then if you want to be contacted or not, this is all optional, because we don't, we don't make any of this public unless you want it to, for some reason, to be public, and you can put some pictures and everything. So what's nice about this is that we don't ask for any like user information or login information. We don't keep like passwords or anything for sighting reports. So this could be totally anonymous if you want it to be anonymous, and just we'll get back in touch with you if we have any questions if you're submitting stuff. And that's pretty much it. Great.
I'm really glad you gave that intro to the system, because it is really useful. But if people use iNaturalist, that's their way to do it in the field. But if they're more comfortable doing it at their computer, they have that other option. So it's really good, depending on what you're comfortable with.
Can you, Ian, can you do it on your phone?
With our website, yes, you can. So the sighting report form I showed you, there is a mobile friendly version of it, so it will work with your phone. And it will take so it'll say, like, do you want to use your current location? And if you say yes, it'll use that. So it does function pretty much the same. It's just not a nice app. You have to go through the website, through your browser to get to it. But there is a mobile friendly version of the sighting report form, yes.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Thank you very much, Nancy. Excellent talk as usual. And hopefully we've gotten some people educated, informed, and maybe inspired to go look for it and report it. And maybe someday they'll pull it up and throw it out. So, and thank you, Ian. Appreciate your additional info at the end. That was really nice. Well, thank you all for attending. Thanks for hanging in there. And we'll, hopefully be able to send you some information about Maryland DNR doing some activities with this plant, so it doesn't just fade off into the background, because we want to get rid of it.
Yes.
So,
all right. Thank you for organizing, Jill, and thank you, Nancy, for making this happen on this day. And Ian, appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for all your hard work, which it has been, I know.